You're on.
Hey guys. So this is a mare that I got in for training that was kind of given the description of really quiet, but also really pushy, kind of disrespectful type, and had some issues with maintaining gait while lunging. So she came in to quote unquote fix those things. I found out pretty quickly working with her that most of her issues stemmed from a lack of confidence, and even more so, like a lack of wanting to even try to communicate with a person as a partner. So this is a pretty typical session with her because she really needs that whole part of her life kind of broken back down to where she can trust a person to be fair and emotionless while still holding the standard and maintaining their personal space. And that's a hard thing to do. A lot of times this is where people get upset and kind of jerk on the horse, or all sorts of different things can happen. So it's interesting with horses like this, as you can see right here, where she likes to really push through. I said in a video that I shared on social media about her that she pushes through, but there's nobody home. She has no real thought or intention behind it other than, I'm just like gonna get out of this situation so that I don't have to be here anymore. So I try a couple of different tactics. This is one that you can do. I've got my dressage whip up out in front of me in the air, and I'm using it in rhythm to help her understand my personal bubble a little bit more. This one works pretty well for horses that are a little bit more in tuned with the person. This little mare, it seems like it's working for a little bit, and then it just kind of wears off. So for her, this is not the tactic that I continued with. But it is all away from her. And I want to make that very clear. Like, when you use rhythm with a horse, especially one that has confidence issues, you want to use it more away from them than towards them. There's a whole theory behind like driving the horse away from rhythm, but on the ground, all you really do if you put a rhythm out towards the horse is you invert the top line and you get them into moving their feet in a more flight type pattern than to actually connect with you in a more purposeful partnership type way. So that's why I try to make sure that I'm always walking away from her if I use that. I know it's a little hard to see where the dressage whip is, but it's out in front of me. And I try to just keep my belly button pointing away from her. And again, I want to see if I can make myself appealing. Horses don't really like when we beg because that makes us seem very unreliable. They definitely don't like it when we're harsh either. But you don't want to be like just constantly feeding a horse treats for it to want to be with you. You want to kind of see if you can teach it to connect and want to join you respectfully with your space. And so that's her core issue. And you could see there, those few moments, my wheels are kind of turning in my head because I'm like, well, that rhythm out in front of her didn't really do a whole heck of a lot. And there she actually like ran into my back. So now I'm changing tactics a little bit and seeing if I utilize more energy towards the hind leg. Does that actually cause her to want to connect with me a little bit more? So I'm going to continue turning away from her to kind of play a little bit that hard to get game, to change her mind so that she can start to shift her thought process from merely dealing with me in her space to actually thinking I'm the most important person in the room for her. So it's a nice little moment of connection followed by a bump into my space where I try to kind of be a little bit the alpha mare and stand my ground. I go back to walking away and putting the rhythm out in front of me. But that's still not really getting through all the way and connecting the dots for her. So again, I'm going to start thinking, I'm going to turn away. I'm going to try and make myself bigger. But then she just disconnects completely. And that's not what I want either. So all of these little signs can mean something. And you see how I'm putting the rhythm out in front of her, but she's very comfortable to stand there and kind of ignore it. So then I go back to playing my hard to get game because I like the changes that does for her. And then I start thinking about the hind leg. And actually paying attention to the hind leg to gain access to a more respectful front end. So for this particular horse, I could do a whole lot to her front end, and at the end of the day, both of us would just feel terrible. But if I think more in terms of how is she positioning her body, how can I influence that position from the hind leg, then I can get her to use her brain a little bit more to connect with me in a more productive way. This is where I kind of start to think about too. A lot of horsemanship programs will talk about follow through or phases or using the quadrants or along the same lines of having the horse get out of your space. I don't necessarily buy into any of that, and I'll tell you why. When she's moving, like right here, she already knows that I'm after that hind leg. Now, I may touch her, but I'm not going to go, this is my phase 1, this is my phase 2, this is my phase 3, and wallop, here's phase 4. Because she already knows that she needs to change something. Why am I going to add more emotion or even commotion to the conversation when she already knows that I'm asking her to change something? There's no use for it other than to just make the conversation worse. So I'm not going to increase my energy. I'm not going to make my corrections harder. I'm just going to be there. And anytime she moves away from the position of partnership or connection with me, then I'm going to ask her to reposition herself through the hind leg. And it totally depends which side, which eye she puts me on. That's going to be the hind leg that I'm going to be able to talk to. I can't pick and choose right now because she's not going to let me. So like right now I'm more off on her left side, so I can talk to the left hind leg. She's going to put me more off onto her right side in a second, right there. So I talk to the right hind leg. And again, I don't need to run after it. I can touch it. But again, like I don't have a long lunge whip. I don't have a big, powerful stick. I just have a flimsy little dressage whip. Because that's all I need. I don't need anything else heavier or harsher. I just need to be able to make a change. And it really doesn't take that much to make a change. Because all of this moving her feet is her trying to make a change, trying to understand what I'm actually asking. And I'm giving her plenty of rope, but not so much that she feels like she has the room to just run away and blow me off completely. The rope is still my safety net here as far as like, I want to have a conversation. I don't want to be flying a kite. So what I'm really looking for is that she positions herself to follow me or either stand with me in a respectful way. And if she can stand right now, that would be more beneficial because keeping her feet still and still remaining confident enough to actually be respectful is a big deal for her. So I like to kind of challenge that. But again, I'm going to keep the rope loose enough that she can make the decision to go. So there, she bumped into my helmet. Again, pushing, gotta adjust it. Again, pushing with her front end into me a little bit. So I'm going to walk away so that I can have the ability to reposition her. So there, I had to make a few tiny adjustments. And even though that was one step, I have to recognize it and I have to leave it and I have to reposition it. Because if you don't recognize the little things, that's when you're going to lose the trust with horses like this. So that's where I kind of broke my own rule. I was not playing hard to get. I wanted to keep the connection. And she wanted to say, see you later. She's also kind of calling for her friends here and there. So that can tell you about her attention span on me as well. So again, here while she's like lunging around me, while she knows that she's not being asked to be lunged, I'm still going to touch her, but I'm not going to get any harder. So I might touch her with the dressage whip. I might just touch her space with the dressage whip. But I'm going to have to talk to that left hind leg until she can do this right here and stand with me. I like to kind of take the attention off of them sometimes, draw in the dirt. And see there, that adjustment took very little effort. I kind of helped her out with that one by moving my head a little bit. And some of these corrections are able to slow down so that I'm able to add in something else for her, the pull down yield. So this is going to be a really hard exercise for her because she is scarred up in front and she is really resistant to pressure on her face. So this is a really difficult thing for her to do, to yield downward from pressure on the pull from the halter. So what I am not doing is muscling the halter down. What I'm not doing is jerking the halter down, anything like that. So priority number one is her positioning, able to connect with me with that better frame of mind. And then number two comes in, can you put your pull down without moving your feet? And sometimes she has to move her pull away from me, move her neck away, and that's okay. I can sometimes follow it, or I can let it go. But like there, she yielded a little bit to the pull pressure, and then she like immediately had to walk off because it puts her in a really different position where she is connected to me and yielded to me. And that's just not really something that she's used to with people. I'm still going to think about set it up and wait. And this is a really cool moment. These are all snorts that are like full body snorts. And that's a big deal for her. I don't think I had really gotten a true like blowout from her in the time that I had had her up until this moment. So that was a really cool thing. And I think it just came about from her feeling heard. I don't really think that I'm necessarily teaching her respect as much as I'm teaching her that I hear her, I understand what she's saying, but that I also have to be able to match up what she's saying her needs are with what my basic safety requirements are. And this is where like the whole concept of follow through and go up in your phases and, get them out of your quadrant, this is where you can actually destroy this moment instead of letting it do its own benefit. So this is where patience needs to do its own work. So there I'm asking her to lower her pole. She's talking to her friends. So of course she has to move her feet. And I immediately just start talking to that right hind leg. As soon as she puts herself in a better position, I ask for the pole to go down. Gets herself out of position. I take a second and I reposition. And then I ask for the pole to go down. It's just honestly as simple as like rinse, lather, and repeat. And you can do it a million times before it actually starts to kind of make sense, take a hold, and change their behavior. So that was an interesting moment right there where I touched her because she actually pushed her hind end into me, into my bubble. So first, and don't quote me on it, but I believe it's the last time that happened because that's not her normal. So she is experimenting just like I was experimenting at the very start of our session. So she's like, oh, I'm having to demonstrate more submission and more confidence because she's asking me to yield at the pole. I'm not so sure about this, so maybe I change my tactic as well. So again, I could have ruined that moment by like really going after her. But instead, I'm going to try really hard to like hold my own ground and ask her to yield from that spot. Because if there's one thing that I learned watching good horses move their herds around, the really good, solid leaders didn't have to move their feet a whole heck of a lot. And they could make faces and horses would just move out of the way. And so that's kind of like my goal with her. And see, even there, instead of like going after it, after the hind leg, when I was standing there and tapping her side and she still didn't move, instead of going after it, I just stayed there and waited for the yield to come. That's a hard thing to do. Give my space back. Need her to reposition. She's really pushing into my space right there on the bottom side of that circle. So I really kind of want to present her with that different idea that I can reach out and touch her. But I'm going to stay within my own space. Like I'm asking her to respect something that's my own, so it can't continuously be a moving target. And that was a really good try for her because I asked first, but then she lowered her pole herself a couple of times. And again, it's just so hard for her to do that without moving her feet. But this is where the confidence can start to grow. And you can see how correcting the hind leg can become a smaller and smaller adjustment. As long as you keep things very clear and your standard is pretty much unchanging. So when you get into a position like this where it's just all the little things, right? The positioning, the repositioning, you have to know that when you go for that yielding of the pole, that you are actually going to kind of mess up what you just did by repositioning the horse. So it's not them making a mistake moving their feet. It's actually part of their learning process. I was really happy with this one right here. And I did get a snort, but then it got a whinny immediately after, so kind of lost the attention. But her thought process in that yield of the pole was a lot better. So you could, I guess, shorten the rope when you go to yield or pull and try and keep her from moving off. Technically, you could. But that's not going to teach her the benefit of learning about her own confidence. And it's not going to set you up in the long run for her learning her own self-carriage either. So this is one of those things that this is what happens before anything else can happen. So whether she wants to be a dressage horse, trail horse, whatever, this is the beginning of self-carriage, because self-carriage can't come without self-confidence. So there's a lot of value in the repositioning. Because that's where you can get the true release from.